Hello, everyone. Today I will be speaking to Puja-Arti, who wrote her MPhil dissertation with my supervision here in the faculty. Now, Puja-Arti, before I start asking you my three questions, can you summarize for us the central focus, the central argument of your dissertation?
So I started my undergrad in theology and Sanskrit, and for my BA dissertation, I looked at medieval and modern sort of Sanskrit commentarial work. And then for the MPhil thesis, I read some journals and magazines written in Gujarati that were sort of recreating and using these templates that were used by traditional, um, I don't know what the right word for this is, but uh, sort of classical templates for argumentation in Sanskrit philosophical texts. And these modern or contemporary journals were using Sanskrit in a very creative way, where they were being translated into Gujarati, but in a way that was adding helpful context for the modern reader. And that was the core of my dissertation.
As we move from the 17th or 16th centuries to the present, do you think something gets lost in translation, or is there some continuity?
Um, it's an interesting word. I don't know if translation is the right word even to use, because I rather like this idea of transcreation. Um,
Translation.
yeah, where the author is translating it, but also adding helpful context and passing the word, and um, because the roots of the language, Gujarati and Sanskrit, they are very common. Um, I think that also helps because it's less of a translation, more of a an exposition of sorts um, into Gujarati. So I don't think there's anything lost, but there is a lot of that's added.
So something is found, if not lost.
Yeah.
Now, let's go back, or rather, let's start with the word divinity itself. When people hear the phrase faculty of divinity, they may feel a bit puzzled or confused or perplexed because divinity, unlike history or law or economics, is not a word we use in everyday English. So, what is the faculty of divinity about? What does that word mean, divinity?
This is something I've been thinking about since the MPhil thesis, about translating sort of terminology, and how would I go about translating divinity into, say, Hindi or Sanskrit. And um, in Hindi, for example, it could be Devatva or Divyata or Devatva. And these terms have connotations of um, having the qualities of being divine. Um, but it could also mean sort of being being the best, or having the best qualities, or being beautiful. But the core word is Deva, or Devi if you use the feminine. And I think that's something that captures a key aspect of Hinduism, or lived Hinduism. Um, so for the past few months, I've been traveling across Gujarat and Rajasthan and Maharashtra, and so many communities here believe in postponing auspicious works until after Holi, which is the day before the Festival of Colors is played. And this day of Holi, there are bonfires being lit that represent the destruction of um, an inauspicious divinity called Holika. And if you look at the narrative behind it, Holika is still a divinity, even though she's an inauspicious one. So to me, I feel like divinity is sought out in so many different ways in the daily life in these regions. And some other ways that I've been struck by are things like feeding animals, feeding cows and pigeons. Is Many people take vows, like religious ones, where they do this practice believing that it will give them good karma. Um, and then other people sort of take care of local divinities, or like in the shape of images that have been passed down by their ancestors, or it is or it may be a local divinity. For example, each village. I recently took a trip across 3 villages in Gujarat, and they're all within like 25 or 30 kilometers of each other, and yet the divinity differed in each village. So they take care of these images, um, and so communities form around them as well. So I see divinity as both a noun and a verb, something that clearly exudes an aura or creates an atmosphere that pervades people's lives in a very active sense. And then also, as a result of that, creates communities and collectives. Um, and it's very much about, I think, seeking a way of, um, or rather, like acting as a conduit between humanity and the divine. These like activities that seek, that sort that are sought to seek the divine, if that makes sense. Um, and then when people see that other people are doing it in similar ways, there are communities forming. Um, and this isn't something that's just native to Gujarat or Rajasthan or Maharashtra. One of my favorite quotes by Bell Hooks, who sort of dabbled in womanist theology, is this idea of paying greater attention to seeking the divine within the context of community over individual self-improvement alone. So that's the way I would go about defining divinity. It's a conduit, also has a great capacity to hold community.
That- That's very interesting because what what your field work seems to be showing us is that divinity is not just about light and sweetness. Divinity can also be found in the shadows, in the darkness, in the so-called negative experiences of life. These are subliminal potencies. Do you know that Bell Hooks always writes her name with the lower case, not
Yeah,
capital B, not capital H?
yeah.
Why do you think she does that?
Um, I don't know. I never actually stopped to ask myself that. Um,
Even I don't
but
know, but
yeah,
I should go and check this.
yeah. I'm gonna Google this later.
Now, why does this study of religion matter to you, and why should it matter to the world at large?
Yeah, this is definitely a common question that universities ask when you apply, when you're seeking funding.
Why?
But
Why?
yeah, even outside of that, I feel like to me it matters because I think that the way we're taught to think, and my undergrad was in theology and religion. But I think the way that we're taught to approach texts, languages, ideas, and now I'm approaching people, it serves as a very solid foundation for thinking about society and culture. And um, it's less about verifying the truth or verifying um, whether it's false or true. Like it matters because it's a very deep part of people's lives,
Right.
and it's clearly illustrated in how um, it shapes a person's cosmology because it pervades their everyday life, their mundane life, and it helps them make. We can see that it helps them make sense of the past, helps them envision futures, it helps them make sense of what it means to be human. And when they engage with sort of ritual and myth and texts and landscapes and animals and spirits and hierarchies and values and belief, and these are sort of seen as pervading their life, you begin to realize just how much potential religion has to explain the world around us. So one of the things that I've recently sort of observed in Gujarat is this practice of giving money on certain occasions like marriage or the birth of a child or even death, and they call it vyavahar, and it's an integral part of society here, because it's seen not just as a marker of kinship, but as a marker of your understanding of how karma works, because if you sort of participate in this obligation well, then the cycle will continue. But if you don't, it's seen as uh, dangerous. It may bring inauspiciousness to your life. Um, so if I sort of approach this practice just in terms of kinship or economic terms, it might it, I don't think it would convey the full spectrum of what's going on. And I think that's why studying religion matters, especially in ways that affect people's lives.
Now, the third question is possible that you have already addressed it in some way, but let me ask it anyway. Um, the time that you have spent studying religion, say in this faculty, how has it shaped or recalibrated your understanding of what it means to be human?
I think more than anything, it's sort of helped me appreciate how people make sense of like existence, emotions, feelings, that might come up either consciously or unconsciously. And one of the more fascinating aspects of my current research is this idea of how resiliency can act as a marker of the human condition. So in my current work, I examine how Gujarati Hindus deal with the disappointment of failing to achieve uh, economic and social mobility through, for example, migration. And some of the common strategies that they use are, are rooted in religious ideals, and it's not a new idea. And uh, this is something that I picked up during my time at the faculty. For example, I read Julian of Norwich, who is uh, a medieval theologian. She was an anchorite, and when she was 30, she was on her deathbed. And during this time, she received visions of the Passion of Christ, and she recovered and wrote about them. And in this work, the theme of resiliency sort of has an underlying current. And so, even though the study of divinity can be about the divine, it teaches us to appreciate why people long for faith, um, and what it means to be a human striving for faith. And it can be faith in God or the favorite football team or the family. But I think it made me appreciate on a human level how like life holds great mysteries, right? This is a very common metaphor in the faculty of religion or faculty of divinity. People can still sense its source in a million different ways, and this way of like pure awe that when they feel it, it brings them to their knees, right? And like quite literally in some cases. Um, but I see this as an indicator of humanity, because to feel is to me to feel something is to be human. And so when I see people sensing these sources of mystery in my fieldwork, it shows me as a student of religion how resiliency and emotion and feeling is such an integral aspect of humanity and the human condition. And I think another thing as well is values, and how we sort of have this innate sort of need for categorizing and labeling aspects of our life. So one of the papers I took at the faculty was on um, sort of Judaism, and I compared the dietary laws in Judaism and Hinduism, and there are so many similarities between the two traditions on on what to eat based on its properties. And I think this is another key theme that um, the concern for purity, the concern for like classification in general. One of the ways we make sense of what it means to be human is to label things and classify. And like, for example, why is it common for South Asian people or Southeast Asian people to remove their footwear before entering a house or entering a place of worship? You know, from the smallest of things, like removing footwear to what people eat. Um, it's a part of like what it means to be human, right? And so I think these two things have been greatly influential in helping me understand what it means to be human through the perspective of religion.
Right. So you're saying that the study of religion can help us to cultivate a form of existential resilience, which we can apply in many different ways in our everyday lives. This habit of waiting patiently for what may or may not happen, but we hope that it will happen, and it
Yeah,
gives you that cement.
I think hope is another thing that is very it's a common theme in so many religious traditions, right? Because as much as religion is about the past, I think it's also about envisioning new futures, and futures in the plural, I think, because um I think that there's people can sense so many possibilities, right, in these things.
And here's my final question for you today. So once upon a time, you were in a faculty of theology, religion, then you moved to a faculty of social anthropology, and then I think you, no, I think I can't remember the precise order. Once upon a time, anthropology, then anthropology, and maybe theology again. So you have been moving back and forth between anthropology and theology faculties, and someone may be a bit confused. They may think theology and anthropology are as diametrically opposed, like the North Pole and the South Pole. So how have you been navigating this tension, this continuum?
Yeah, I think rather than a tension, I think it is a continuum. It's a sort of like a hermeneutic circle that if you start at one point with anthropology, you end up with theology, especially if you're an anthropologist of religion. I think what sort of the study of religion and what divinity can help with is the history and the texts of a community that subscribe to religious ideals. And oftentimes, the community will themselves invoke these histories and these texts as a critical part of their contemporary understanding of religion, right? And for instance, in my study of Sanskrit commentaries, I can still see the effects it has on contemporary communities, even though nowadays people study Sanskrit less. They might not understand texts. They might not even read them, but they still hold them in very great esteem, and they record them and they memorize them in sort of like short phrases and in key words. And so I think that's for me that's been the greatest advantage of being a part of both departments, both faculties, and then anthropology sort of provides um, a great way to embed religion in society. So I can see how kinship, how economics, how politics come together and like have an effect on people's lives. You know, it's not just religion, but it's also all these different factors that are coming together and underlying um, society and culture.
You are a very skillful translator, transcreator through the lenses of text and context, context and text. You are kind of marrying them, bringing them together in hopefully a happy marriage.
Yeah, most times it's a happy marriage.
So, Puja-Arti, thank you very much for talking to me today, and I hope and I wish you a very good, productive time with fieldwork in Gujarat, Rajasthan, and Maharashtra. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.